100 for the opening opposition. Well done. The top half of the debate is now complete, but before we move on to the closing teams, let's first hear from our three judges on how they saw the debate so far. Professor Jan Gellis.
All right, so for the opening government side, I think you were hinting that all of these arguments are, hinged on the idea of choice. So I think we need to discuss that also. Like, when do we say that someone is actually giving a meaningful choice? I think a criteria, a discussion on what are these, reasons for us to say that, yes, that's a meaningful choice, must be discussed at the first speech so that it would be easier for us to, discuss all the consequential ideas that you wanted to mention at the end.
So let me comment on the opening opposition. I thought you did a good job both of setting out your primary principles and arguments and also being reactive to what the government had said. With respect to the sanctity of life, I mean, obviously a slogan like that is very hard to rebut against, but I mean, repeating it doesn't make it more contentful. So explaining why in this case permitting a policy of euthanasia would not be respectful of the sanctity of life or would compromise it, or explaining exactly where that value lies, a little bit more elaboration rather than just repeating the slogan, I think would have been helpful.
I did feel that both teams tried to engage opening government to the extent that you were even preempting some of the arguments that you thought the opposition side may come up with. But then when there were issues that came up that you weren't expecting, maybe the flexibility and on-your-feet response wasn't quite there. But then the DPM did a pretty good job of perhaps picking the Prime Minister up, coming up with the concept of prior agreements, which the closing government later on called living will.
Thank you for your insight. We now move on to the closing half of today's debate, and to start us off, I would like to invite the member of government up to the podium.
This is the MG of the closing opposition, and we of the closing opposition would like to propose the motion: voluntary euthanasia should be allowed. Before I get to my arguments, let me rebut some of the stuff that the opening opposition has stated. The opening opposition has stated that I'll just get to my arguments. The first argument I have is that the first argument is that we should allow people painless death. And peaceful death is much better than painful suffering. And our second is that patients have a choice. We have to respect the patient's choice and give them chance to have their own choice of it, rather than living a life of endless pain. And also, the government has absolutely no right to stop patients from ending their own lives. It is the patient's own choice, and it is something that we should respect. And if we do not give them a choice to end their lives in terms of suffering, it is not giving them a choice, and it will go against freedom. As stated in the Korea's Constitution Article Note 10, we must guarantee the right of people to seek happiness, and this also means that we have to guarantee the right of people to get a pain, avoid pain. So this means that if we go with policy, then giving them a right to choose euthanasia is going with the policy, and I would like to therefore rebut the opposition's case. Going with our second. Before I go to a second argument, I would like to state some stuff that states some what the proposition has failed to provide in the first clash. The opening opposition has asked the question: what about the vegetarian stated people who are unable to answer if they will choose euthanasia? I would like to say give a new idea that we would be able to use. I believe with if we make a living will, which means that a person before the person suffers an accident has the ability to has the choice to make a will, whether or not.
Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Then are you stating that we can make a living will that by expecting our future that we will have an accident or not?
Yes, I believe it is really actually possible, and of course, everybody before they get into action, when they are living normal life, they can really choose to have a will, whether or not they accept the enthusiasm before they get into action. I think it is necessary if we go and it is really realistic, and this will be able to if we use this, I think even if the vegetarians, the people entered vegetarian state, I think it will be used for good. And as for so in this current society, with the advance of science and technology, people live much longer than ever. And this may look like a good thing, but how in reality people are being forced to continue their lives through great suffering and through the help of technology and machines. I believe that living a life that attached to a machine and living a painful day over and over is not considered a life. I think we have to respect patients and give them a choice give them a choice. It is not taking away their lives. It is merely giving them another choice to end their lives instead of suffering. And in this way, I believe that patients' freedom is truly respected if we accept this enthusiasm. So I have stated the arguments of the closing opposition and rebutted some of the arguments from the opening opposition. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was the member of government arguing for the motion and in outlining why government should legalize voluntary euthanasia. He gave the autonomy argument that every patient has the right to decide when to die and that this right is protected in the case of Korea by the Constitution. Okay, let's see how many lights have been switched on for the member of government. 20. So exactly 40% of our audience judges agreed with the member of government. All right, member of opposition, it's your turn.
As the member of the opposition, I'm here to oppose to the motion to legalize voluntary euthanasia. But before we move on to our arguments and before I elaborate on our arguments, I would like to offer a rebuttal to the proposition team. First of all, they have mentioned that humans have the right to make their own decisions, and this has to be supported by one's consent. However, we question the proposition about what about the people in vegetation state. They have mentioned that this policy regarding euthanasia, voluntary euthanasia, has some flaws in it and that is not perfect. Regarding this argument, we are questioning ourselves. If there are no direct guidelines, if there are no direct restrictions regarding these euthanasia policy, then are we valuing one's decision much more than one's life? So I think that is a flaw. And then another thing is that they're gonna long-term solution is not supported, and they have mentioned that the living will can be a solution for people of vegetation state. However, there's a flaw in living wills because, first of all, living wills regularly fail to have their intended effect, and most of the people do not have living wills in the first place because living wills is very idealistic policy, and the people do not know when they're gonna die. So,
QI, ma'am.
sir.
So what I'm saying is that if we develop this euthanasia, we are going to make all of the people go through this living will, and in that way, I think we can say that euthanasia will be helpful. Yes.
Okay, but first of all, how do the patients know that whenever he comes to the state of wanting euthanasia, how does he know that he wants certain euthanasia? And also in the living wills, not too often do not reach the people actually making decisions for incompetent patients, and the living wills do not increase the accuracy with which surrogates identification of patients' preferences. And also moving on to the elaboration of our opposition's arguments. Our first argument was that the government has the right to care for the citizen's life, and this means that the opposition believe that the government has the right to intervene in a citizen's life make them realize how valuable life is. And since we are promoting save your lives, and promoting not to commit suicide thoughts, we are showing us the citizens to not use euthanasia, and promoting the harmful aspects of euthanasia. And also what they're neglecting is that the government is not trying to make the people suffer from not getting euthanasia, because by keeping this illegal means that no government can use it for political means. And then our second argument was that the social groups are at risk of abuse. For example, like we mentioned, such elderly people end up having their lives terminated because selfish relatives want their inheritance and want their money after their death.
For that information.
Sir.
So you have mentioned that it can be overused by the persons to my own sick, but the euthanasia is not only that case. Actually, euthanasia can be regulated by the person.
Sorry, time's up.
You may continue because the point of information was raised before the minute.
So the euthanasia can be regulated by the getting the agreement of the student of the persons, and by getting the agreement of the doctors that this disease cannot be cured by further treatment. How do you think of it?
Okay, like we mentioned in the second argument, we have said that people undergo through pressure from their families and relatives, saying that they feel as a pressure and a burden in the society, so they just commit suicide. This is like an involuntary euthanasia disguised as voluntary euthanasia, which means that they're not committing euthanasia by their own will. So I think the society and also the relatives have a problem causing this euthanasia. And also, this could lead to the slippery slope of euthanasia by abusing this medicine and abusing this policy for their own will, for other people's will, and not their own will. Thank you.
Okay, that was a member of opposition arguing against the motion. And in her argument, she said that the door to voluntary euthanasia is very possibly the same door to involuntary or forced euthanasia. So let's see how many of our audiences agree with the speaker. 13, so 26% of our audience judges agree with the member of opposition. All right, continuing on with the last speaker from